Hello and thank you for joining me. You probably recognize where I am. I'm standing in front of the Oklahoma State Capitol. You know, a lot of folks ask me how I come up with ideas for the show, and a lot of them come from you all. You post on my Facebook page or you see me and you mention something in conversation. And sometimes they come just from looking around. I was driving on 235 and I noticed all the scaffolding on the Capitol. And I thought, I wonder what exactly is going on in there. So I came on by and started looking around, and I kept running into barricades and barriers. So I decided to put a call in to see if we could get a behind-the-scenes tour. So that's what we're going to do today. Hopefully you can stick around for the next 30 minutes as we get a behind-the-scenes tour of the Oklahoma State Capitol renovation project here on Oklahoma Ground. Well, we've made it inside, and I am with, what is your name?
Trey Thompson. I am the State Capitol Project Manager for the Office of Management Enterprise Services, which is the state agency in charge of managing this massive project.
You got a lot to watch.
Yes, sir. It's a lot of. We have a $245 million capital restoration project here that will take place over a span of between 7 and 8 years. So it's a massive project. We're doing it all while the building is occupied and they're using it.
It's a working space.
Yes, a lot of logistics to overcome, but it's an exciting project to restore this beautiful people's house for the wonderful people of Oklahoma.
Well, let's start at the beginning. This is the old front door. I've never been able to use it. We've always kind of come in the side. Is there a plan for this?
Sure. You know, one of the things you see the scaffolding down there right now, we're in the process of restoring that entrance, and we are restoring all of the stone outside of that entrance, so it'll be a safe place to come in the building again. Unfortunately, it can't ever be the main entrance of the Capitol building again because it's not disability accessible.
I was noticing, I don't know if you can see that, Mark, this staircase is amazing.
This is actually standing at the bottom of this staircase and looking up is one of my favorite views in the entire Capitol.
Yeah.
And so I can't wait until people could potentially come in those doors once again, look up that grand staircase, and then see this incredible view of the dome from down there. It's spectacular and it's breathtaking, and it really is one of the things that makes our Capitol building such a wonderful building.
And of course, when the staircase was built, we didn't have the dome. Where did the old ceiling stop on that dome?
So where you see the burgundy circle, that is about where the old ceiling stopped.
So it was still a grand staircase up into that shorter, did they call it a rotunda?
They
back
had
then?
a shallow saucer dome with a stained glass state seal up there, and then in the 60s the murals were added up there. So it was still a very nice view, but I love having the dome up there that was added in 2002.
And you're doing work inside the building.
Yes.
And you're doing work outside the building.
That's right.
Do you have different construction companies?
Yes, so on the interior, our company is Manhattan Construction.
Okay.
On the exterior, we have J.E. Dunn Construction Company.
Okay, can we take a look at some of the outside?
Yeah, let's head outside and look around.
Okay, great. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell me what I'm looking at?
All right, my name is Julia Manglitz, and I am the preservation consultant with Trainer HL on the exterior package.
Okay, and what are we looking at here?
Right now we're looking at mortar joints, and this is an example of the existing condition that we found the mortar on the building when we started the project.
And why is this bad?
You can see this crack here, and this is bad because it means that we get water into this joint. And that's not good for the stone, and it's not good for any of the ferrous anchors, which are steel, if you want to think about it that way, that anchor these stones to the rest of the wall construction.
And it would make it rust and fail.
And
like in my own home, water gets in there, freezes, and expands.
Exactly, and that's not good. And one of our first tasks was to try to understand why the mortar was failing. And this joint down here is a really good example of what we found, is that the last time it was pointed, they really only went a very shallow amount.
That's only a 1/4 inch
Yeah.
mortar there.
And a lot of times it's very void. There are joints that I can put this much of this
Oh, wow.
tool in there.
Okay.
So it's capable of taking on a lot of water.
So this is 100 years old?
No.
No.
The building's been repointed, we believe, twice.
Okay.
So the last time it was repointed, though, they went in typically with very shallow mortar.
Okay.
And because it's shallow, they really couldn't properly compact it into the joint, which means it really didn't make the right contact with either stone. Otherwise, it would have just kept falling to the back.
Yeah.
So we know they didn't compact it very well. And the building has very fine joints, which is
Yeah, they are.
typical for a high-style building like this to have very narrow joints. That also means that the mortar tends to dry out more quickly. So if they weren't curing it properly and they weren't placing it properly, you'll see failures like this.
Now, I've noticed just in some of the stuff in my own home projects, they're having a lot more advances in things like mortar. Are you using a different style?
We are using
Or
lime,
diff-
cement, and
Okay.
sand, which are traditional. And when we're working on historic masonry buildings
Yeah.
that are mass masonry walls, which is what this is, we want to stay with traditional mortars because this wall needs to breathe. It needs to be able to take on moisture when it rains or when it snows or when we have really heavy, dense fogs, which we had the other morning. And then it needs to be able to safely let that water back out.
Okay.
The best way for that to happen is to have mortar in the joints that is not as strong as the stone and is less dense so that the water moves to the joint lets the water out of the wall, and if there is deterioration from any sort of freeze thaw because of the moisture content, it happens in the joint because the joints are much less expensive to replace than these large stones.
Yeah, your seed cracks all of it? Okay.
Yeah, so
So now, Julie, I'm just thinking, you have to know construction, but you also have to know history.
yes, absolutely. And you have to know each building's history.
Wow.
Because even if you had two identical buildings that were built right next to each other,
Yeah.
unless they maintained the same ownership and had the same
Sure.
maintenance and the same life, basically, they're not really the same buildings, even if they started off in day one.
Did you enter this industry wanting to be a historical
Yes.
stone?
I came into architecture knowing that I wanted to work on historic buildings.
Okay.
Historic masonry has always been a passion and a fascination for me.
Yeah.
I've been in the architecture field for 20 years and doing masonry restorations for almost as long. So started off with smaller projects and have gradually worked into doing much larger buildings like the Oklahoma State Capitol. And these are great projects because
Yeah.
these buildings are so important to so many people.
So, Julie, what are we watching?
So right now we're watching someone pointing mortar. What they're doing right now is filling the joints, and obviously up here where the capitals are, the joints get pretty intricate to fill. We are asking them to make sure that there's certain minimum thickness of mortar in all of the joints, whether they're
layer after layer.
yes, and he has to build it up that way, and he's working with a relatively stiff mix of mortar. That allows them to pack that joint full, make sure that we're not leaving any air pockets, and that also gets good contact then between the two stones so that we get a good bond in the mortar. And they do make sure that these are wetted periodically. Again, that just helps that cure so that the mortar stays a little bit damper longer. It helps improve the suction with the stone and therefore the bond.
So, Mark, let's pull out a little because that's fascinating. But look what we're on.
Yes.
Could you? The detail here is amazing. So we're at the top, aren't we?
We are.
You don't.
And each
People
one
don't
of
get
your
up here.
capitals has the eagles on them. These really deep ones have 3 eagles, so there's one on each return that hides in here. All of these capitals were carved from one block of stone. So the joint is up above the eagle's head, and the bottom joint is here.
Oh my God.
So this started off as one large block of stone.
They carved.
Yes, and all of these were hand carved. They would have been using air tools likely for production at this time. Air tools were introduced about the turn of the century into stone
Okay.
production, and so they were fairly well in use
Hand
by the
carved.
1915-16 production dates that these would have been carved.
Okay. What if you had to reproduce this? What technology would we use today?
Well, there are still people who hand carve them. We also have robot carvers.
Are they 90 years old? I mean,
No,
how do you
no.
learn to?
No, stone carving is still a tradition that is taught.
Wow.
There are fewer of them today than there
Sure.
would have been 100 years ago because we don't use this
Yeah.
much on our buildings anymore. We don't make them as beautiful, I think, in some ways as we used to. But there are still traditionally trained masons who know how to do this type of work.
But also, what else could you do?
We also do have robot carvers.
Okay.
The problem with a lot of robot carvers is they're not necessarily capable of the kind of relief that you see here. They have trouble with undercuts. So
Okay.
they can use a robot carver to rough this out very quickly, and the robot can run 24/7 for as long as it needs to.
Yeah.
But even using a robot carver frequently, you'll find producers have to come in and hand finish things.
Can you
Robot
see these
carvers are also-
ridges in there?
Yeah, so that's a chisel mark.
Yeah, sure.
So I can look at this and I know what chisel they used to
Historically,
create
you know what
this.
they did, how they made it.
And tooling marks are something that robot carvers also don't do very well
Okay.
because the tools that they use are different than the tools that a human being would use.
Mark, look right up here at this detail.
Sometimes they're similar.
Fascinating that that was hand carved.
All of this was hand done. So we do have one person on the project who is charged with doing repairs to these types of elements. We don't have a lot of repairs to these elements, but we do have some.
And next time we're at the Capitol, we look up, we can look at this footage and say we were right there.
Yeah.
We're 5 floors up.
We are 5 floors up. You're on scaffold level 8. Our scaffold sections go up to 12. Sorry. There's
So you
12
can get
levels of
right
scaffold.
on this, and we just won't be able
So
to
you're
do
very
that.
near the top. And this one has not been cleaned.
Okay, that's
you
great.
see
So this
a
is a
lot
before.
Of, yeah, you see a lot of the soiling here and underneath here, and you can kind of see the orange haze of.
So what's causing some of these different colors?
So a lot of the orange is good old-fashioned Oklahoma red clay dirt. You all have been through
sure.
quite a dry spell.
Gets in the
Yes.
air and
And it blows onto the building. And we have 2 airs of sealer that were applied prior to any of us being around and working on the building.
Yeah.
And the sealer does make cleaning on this building a real challenge
Does
because
it?
they were trying to waterproof the building. As sealers get applied, they either don't get applied evenly. The stone doesn't absorb it evenly because stone is a natural product. It doesn't have the same pore structure. It also bonds to the stone really well, and so it's not coming off. And it's causing a lot of irregular soiling because areas that it either was worn off or wasn't applied as thick. The stone tends to stay wetter longer because the stone does get wet, but it can't dry through that sealer. So the areas that don't have as much tend to stay wet. The dirt sticks there. We get more biological. We get more of the orange clay.
What's something else that
sticks.
causes discoloration?
Biological is one of the ones that causes discoloration. That tends to be more of a black color.
When you say biological, are we talking birds?
No, birds though also do make things a little dirty. We don't have a whole lot of that. Most of that's in the South Portico.
Yeah.
Biological tends to be sort of lichens and algae.
Oh, okay, sure.
Things that you
Mildews.
might things that you see growing on the on
And
the north
it
side of your
grows on
house.
rock. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you'll see it on the siding on the north side of your house as well. So that is cleaned with steam. We use a very gentle abrasive technique, micro abrasive technique that's delivered in water so that it's very gentle to the stone to remove the orange soiling. And then we also have a little bit of atmospheric soiling, which is these dark crusts that you see underneath here.
Okay.
So I'm going to introduce you to Lindsay Boyce, who is our project manager.
Hello,
with
Lindsay.
J.E.
Will Schwab.
And she's going to talk about the window and the cast iron restoration process here.
great.
And we're going to start with pretty much what we've inherited.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Lindsay, what are we looking at here?
So this is an existing window prior to us beginning any of the restoration process
Okay, so this is what's been out in the weather
for the last 100
for
years.
the last 100 years.
Yep. This is the state of most windows when we come up to them
And what is
prior
this?
to the abatement. So this section here is what we call the cast iron spandrel section. We're on the 3rd building level, and right above us is the 4th level. So this spans the levels in between.
So what is fascinating about this scaffolding is we have 3 floors up, but your craftsmen and women can get right to that.
Correct. We have 12 levels of scaffold for each elevation around the entire building.
And that's a
it
project
really,
in and of itself, isn't
Yes, it is. This equipment is a major piece of the work that we're doing out here. It allows us to get right up close and personal with the stone and the windows, the components that we're basically restoring to give it that like new finish.
How long does it take to build a section?
For an elevation that we're on, this is one of the longest elevations that we have on this building. For one section at a time, so cutting that elevation in half will take about 3 to 4 weeks to install.
Just for the scaffolding?
Just for the scaffolding, yep.
Wow,
The
but wow, it
scaffolding-
pays off.
Yes, it does. The scaffolding itself is actually fully tied back to the building.
How do you tie scaffolding to a stone building?
Yeah, so we primarily like to tie the building, or the scaffolding back into the stone joints itself.
Okay.
And we have scaffold ties that allow us to do that.
Are you drilling in?
We do. We drill into the joints, preferably in lieu of the face of the
Sure.
stone,
You
because
don't
then that would just become another repair that we would have to fix
Okay.
down the road.
So you're locked to this building.
We are. This scaffolding can withstand 120 mile per hour winds.
And I notice it looks like a giant sail on the outside.
Correct. So the majority of the restoration activities that we do out here have
Yeah.
a temperature requirement,
Oh,
and that is to
sure.
make sure that those materials cure properly over time.
So do you actually heat this?
We do.
Really?
During the winter months, we have massive heaters that we bring out here and a temporary duct system that runs all the way through the
Oh my
scaffolding.
God. Now, in the Oklahoma summers, do you cool it down?
We sure do. We do.
Really?
And it really helps us maintain those temperature requirements, and it
I
allows
can't
that
paint
material.
in January, but you guys can.
Right, right, exactly right. It allows us to maintain those proper requirements so
Okay.
that the material lasts for as long as possible. Yep.
So what is the process?
These sections here of cast iron spandrel are actually integral to the building skin.
Do you sandblast them?
What we do is a process that has lead paint removes, and they use different hand tools to remove all of the paint that's here
Kind of
from
like
originally.
you're grinding?
A lot of it's grinding, a lot of it's scrubbing,
Oh my
scraping.
God. And that's all abatement
Correct.
because it's lead-based.
That's correct. We want to get all of that
Wow.
old paint removed to get it back down to the bare cast
Now, what
iron.
about chemical strippers and things like that?
We do have two different types of chemicals that we use in that removal process.
I can't imagine grinding off all that paint.
Yep. They do use the proper respirators and the proper coverage
Sure.
to make sure all that material is contained and doesn't get exposed anywhere.
Now, I think the one next door has already been stripped.
Yep.
Let's go over there. Oh, that's beautiful.
So this is what a window looks like, or the cast iron looks like, once the lead paint has been completely removed.
Now, the building was never raw like this. Has it always been painted?
It has always been painted.
Okay.
We
So
did,
this is an intermediary step.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. We did some investigating, and the paint that we do go back with
Mm-hmm.
once all the paint has been installed is what we believe to be the original paint that was used
really?
previously, a statuary bronze color.
Nice. Okay, so this is the cast iron they've ground down.
This is the cast iron. It completely exposes the base that you see here, and from this stage we're able to review the cast iron and the steel components to see what repairs have to take
sure.
place. That process in and of itself was kind of another exploratory time for us as well. And
Any
through
surprises
that-
with the damage?
a lot of surprises
Yeah.
that we had to come up with, and at the window sills themselves,
Yeah.
which are just below us, we do repairs, and that process includes an ultrasonic testing method.
Very high tech. You got text
Yes.
messages and temperature gauge and ultrasonic.
That ultrasonic testing method basically tells us what the thickness of the steel is, and if the thickness of the steel drops below our specified amount, then we know we need to go in and do repairs.
Okay, Lindsay, this looks pretty nice.
Yes, this is a completed window following restoration. You can kind of see a little bit of the dust that we've got on the windows. We're going through a final wash down of the stone and the windows, so it'll get a final clean right before we take down the scaffolding.
This is hand painted.
Yes, it is. So our paint process is actually a 3-step paint process, and each step requires different mill thicknesses and dry film thicknesses of the paint.
Wow.
So a lot of testing is involved, and again, those temperatures
And I
really
was
do
gonna say
come into
temperature,
play.
so it's-
Right.
Okay.
The first layer of paint, once the surface has been completely prepared
Mm-hmm.
and needle scaled to receive the paint, we install our first layer of paint. That first layer is a rust inhibitor to prevent rust from occurring
Sure.
down the road, and then our second layer is also serves the same purpose.
Okay.
It is
So
also a
two
rust
layers
inhibitor.
kind of a primer
Correct.
protective.
Correct. Each layer that we do apply has a different color. So as we're walking around scaffolding, we can see
Know
where the
you're
stages
at.
of paint
Yeah,
are.
You guys have done this before.
And it's also because of coverage. By having different colors, we are able to see if they're making the proper coverage and getting that right
Okay, sure.
dry film thickness. And then, of course, the final coat is what you see here, and it is a UV ray protectant for
And
the first 2 layers.
What is the official color? Do you know the name?
The official color is a statuary bronze,
Statuary
and
bronze.
as I mentioned, we believe that it was the original color that was used 100 years ago.
Now, these windows used to open.
Correct. These
Didn't they?
windows used to be operable, and
Those are huge.
They are. They're very large windows, and they used to operate with weight boxes.
Okay, like we have in our homes, but
correct,
probably
correct.
much larger.
Now, as we've talked about previously, they are no longer operable, And
Why are they no longer operable?
they're no longer operable due to the preferences of the state and more than anything, making sure that the temperatures are properly regulated on the inside.
Oh, because when they
of the
built it,
building.
there was no air conditioning.
Correct.
So you'd hike up the window, turn on the
right.
fan.
Right. So
Now you got to set your temperature.
the
Okay,
interior
so-
restoration that's going on now will really help improve the entire HVAC process in the inside
So
of the
they've
building.
sealed it up. Now it's
Correct.
climate controlled.
Correct, and as you can see, we have already gone through and installed the new window sealants.
Mm-hmm.
So previously, the old windows, we don't believe they were watertight. So we have found a lot of different tissues, little things stuck into nooks and crannies throughout the windows
To stop the draft?
Yes, to stop the draft. So
That's funny.
part of our process was
That's
to
great.
figure out how to get these windows watertight.
Mm-hmm.
We've done as many as 21 water tests on a single window
Ugh.
just to understand how water's
Yeah.
getting in and out. So
These still look like they could open and close, but they
they
don't.
do. From
Okay, so
from
you
a
kept that
historical
look.
perspective,
Yeah.
we want the windows to look the same way they did originally. So all of the original hardware you can kind of see on the
Do
inside.
I see a chain?
Does get put back into place. Yes.
Look at that. So it's kind of a dummy.
Yeah.
That's
It's
a
it's
nice touch.
non-operable, but you can tell by what was done originally for the historical purposes. We would
That's
go ahead and
nice.
put back that chain that was there
Okay.
previously.
Yeah, I noticed the latches on top are still
Yes, yeah, the latches, the majority of them are restored.
Okay.
We did go ahead and put in new chains because the chains previously were in such bad shape it would have cost more money to
Yeah.
try and restore them and fix them than it would just to purchase new.
there. Oh, that's a nice touch.
Once all that new hardware is in place on the inside, we do go in with a final storm window. And that storm window fixes to the frame on the inside.
So they're not going to be touching the
Correct,
hardware.
correct.
So it's almost like a museum piece.
Yes.
So this is a chimera, a winged lion. It's a fantastical creature that does not exist in nature. We have 8 of these beautiful carvings on the building. They were carved from one block of stone. It started off as 60,000 pounds.
Oh my God. And do they all match?
Yes, they're all very similar to
Very
each other.
similar.
This one, though, has quite a mustache, which we noticed from way over there when we started on the project.
Yeah.
So I nicknamed him Burt for Burt Reynolds, from the Smokey and the Bandit
the big
era.
mustache, sure.
And it's kinda
sticking
stuck.
out of his head.
Sticking out of his head are lightning rods, air terminals
Okay.
for the lightning protection system for the building.
Okay. Now, Trey, could you come in here? Past this beautiful work of art, I see a chimney with an aerial antenna. Can you explain that? Excuse me, Julie. That doesn't look like it fits on this majestic building.
Right. So the antenna, I'm sure, was late 70s technology that was stuck up there.
Yeah.
They probably put a television in the Senate lounge, which was 2 floors below.
So that's where we're at.
And
Okay.
I'm sure that's what they used the antenna for.
Very
And when technology changed, I'm sure no one just got up here to take
Hey,
it
we
down.
need to get that aerial
The
up.
chimney actually serves the blue room, which was the historical stateroom on the 2nd floor
Okay.
of the Capitol building, and the Senate lounge. Both of those rooms have chimneys. If we were in the room that's right below that chimney, you would see 2 flues that kind of converge into one,
okay.
and they come up right out there.
Now, are there other fireplaces in the building?
Yeah, so there's a fireplace in the house lounge too, so you'll see a chimney on the other side of
Okay.
the building
But
as
just
well.
4 total or 3 total?
I believe 3 total.
Okay.
I can't think of another one right now. But
And that adds a lot of charm, but I guess in the old days, heat.
yeah, I'm sure they used it for heat.
Yeah.
Nowadays, all the fireplaces have been decommissioned because we don't encourage people building fires in the building anymore.
Sure. Now, you
but-
mentioned something, speaking of fires, the window sashes were all metal.
Yeah, most of the materials in this building and on this building are not combustible. So when you talk about the windows, when you talk about the floors are made of marble, the walls made of plaster, when you
Doors.
talk about the doors, they're hollow metal doors, the frames of the doors are metal. There was very little, if any, combustible material in this building. And for the simple reason, around the time that the Oklahoma State Capitol was built, there was a big Capitol building boom in the country.
Okay.
And one reason for that was because so many other capitals burned down. So they intentionally...
So
they
it's a sign of the times.
That's right. They intentionally did not put combustible material because they didn't want the Capitol to burn down.
Isn't that interesting?
Pretty interesting.
Okay. So these elevations have been completed, is that correct?
Yes, if you look behind us here, all of the windows, the stone have been restored. The stone has been repaired. New mortar has gone into the joints. The stone has been cleaned. New glass in the windows. So all of these areas behind us have been completely done. So up to this point, we have restored 5 of the 12 elevations on the Capitol building.
Okay, and this is a great way to notice the different types of stone. Why don't you tell us the different types of stone we're seeing here?
So on the first base level of the Capitol building, we have granite that was quarried in Oklahoma at a quarry called 10 Acre Rock near
really?
Tishomingo, Oklahoma.
Nice.
And then everything above that is limestone from Bedford, Indiana.
So the pink is from Oklahoma and the limestone in Indiana.
Exactly.
Now I notice this, it looks like a wall. What did you call this, Julia?
So this is a balustrade.
Okay, and it's gray. It's not that
It's gray.
pink.
This is also an Oklahoma granite, though, that is
Okay.
quarried in very near the same location.
And are these limestone?
These are limestone,
Okay.
and there's a light well down here, which is
Ah.
this keeps us from falling in the light well.
Okay, very good.
So this portion of the work has not been completed yet.
Mm-hmm.
This is set to start, I believe, the beginning of next year.
And just be cleaning it up, and I see some discoloration.
Yes,
stuff.
and,
Okay.
and again, joints.
The
There are a
joints,
few
sure.
repairs that need to happen, but primarily it's cleaning.
Well, thank you all. This has been fascinating on the outside, and Trey, I understand there's a lot to see inside,
Let's go inside the building.
so let's head inside. I hope you can join us next time as we explore the restoration work going on inside this beautiful historic building. There are some exciting changes in store for all of us that love visiting the Capitol. Changes that you will definitely notice and appreciate once they are completed. So be sure to tune in for part 2 of our behind-the-scenes tour of the Oklahoma State Capitol renovation project, right here on Oklahoma Grand. Oklahoma Grand is a proud partner with TEAM, an interfaith nonprofit organization determined to break cycles of incarceration in Oklahoma. Visit team.org. Oklahoma Baptist University, offering a fully online MBA in Project and Energy Management, International Business, and Leadership. Visit okbu.edu/graduate.
And Producers Playhouse. Creative visual communications for Oklahoma since 1997.
For more in-depth interviews and additional footage from today's show, visit our Facebook page or oklahomagrand.tv.